There is a moment in every life when the world pauses in a way that feels unnatural, not poetic, not peaceful, unnatural, like reality suddenly holds its breath just to see whether you will notice. For most people, it happens quietly, in places that were never meant to feel spiritual, in the fluorescent stillness of a late-night gas station, in the metallic hum of an elevator where no one makes eye contact, in the middle of a rushed prayer you whisper only because guilt taught you to. And in that fragile pause, there is a presence, not a gentle one, not a comforting one, a presence that feels like a hand tearing open the curtain between who you are and who you pretend to be. Most people don't talk about that moment because it feels dangerous, too honest, too close. It makes your heart beat in a way that has nothing to do with fear of punishment and everything to do with fear of truth. Because the voice that stirs inside you does not sound borrowed. It does not sound inherited. It does not sound like something you memorized. It sounds like you. The you beneath the noise. The you beneath the conditioning. The you that remembers truths you were trained to forget. And that is what terrifies people more than death, more than judgment, more than the idea of sin. Because if the voice inside you is real, then everything outside you becomes questionable. The rules, the rituals, the expectations you swallowed without chewing, the systems you submitted to because someone said they were sacred. When that inner voice rises, it puts every outer voice on trial. And most people cannot handle that trial, so they smother it with distractions. They hide behind tradition. They cling to structures that were built not to liberate them, but to keep them predictable. But imagine something far more explosive. Imagine the whisper inside you stops whispering. Imagine it speaks with a clarity that cannot be softened by ritual or silenced by authority. Imagine it says the words you have always known but never had the courage to face. Imagine God spoke honestly, not politely, not gently, not through intermediaries who edit the message to maintain order, but directly, pure, unfiltered, without permission. If that happened, churches would not collapse from violence. They would empty from revelation. People would walk out not in anger, but in recognition. They would finally understand the difference between God and the structures built to control access to Him. They would realize that divinity was never locked in walls, never dependent on rituals, never restricted to voices wearing titles. The divine would be revealed in the only place no one could regulate, the human soul. Picture it. A cathedral before sunrise, cold stone, echoes that still remember centuries of confession, a candle burning down to its last quiet thread, and then a single sentence rises, not from the altar, but from your chest, a sentence that feels like someone striking a match inside your bones. You wouldn't kneel, you wouldn't bow, you would stand frozen, trembling, because for the first time in your life, the divine would feel close enough to touch, and terrifyingly, it would feel like it has always been there. If this beginning stirs something in you, even a flicker, stay with me. The journey ahead is going to shake the ground beneath everything you thought was sacred. And if you want to follow it all the way through, I invite you gently to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice becomes part of this awakening. There comes a day, sometimes loud, sometimes barely noticeable, when something you always believed in begins to fracture, not break, fracture. Like hairline cracks spreading across glass you assumed was unbreakable. You don't see it at first. You only feel it. A strange thinning of certainty, a small coldness where warmth used to live, a subtle shift in the weight of a belief you carried for so long it became part of your spine. It can happen in a place you once considered sacred, a church where the silence suddenly feels scripted, a ritual that once moved you, but now feels mechanical, a sermon that lands in your chest with the dullness of repetition instead of revelation. Or it can happen in the most ordinary moment, while washing dishes, scrolling your phone, waiting for the microwave to beep, when a thought rises from somewhere too deep to ignore. A thought that whispers, "What if this isn't truth? What if this is training?" Most people mistake this feeling for doubt, but doubt is gentle. Doubt hesitates. Doubt tiptoes. This is different. This is sharp. This is surgical. This is the moment when the curtain pulls back and you see the machinery behind the holiness. The human hands, the human rules, the human fear disguised as divine instruction. You begin to sense a truth you were never supposed to examine. The truth that not everything taught to you was meant for you. Some of it was meant to keep you small enough to manage. Imagine walking into a grand temple you once believed was pure. The stained glass still glows. The choir still echoes. The air still feels heavy with centuries of devotion. But something is off. Not wrong. Off. The walls feel tighter. The silence feels rehearsed. The symbols feel like props. You notice details you ignored before. The pauses in the priest's voice that feel more like performance than conviction. The polished smiles of people who wear obedience like a badge. The subtle pressure to conform wrapped in the language of salvation. And for the first time, you feel something that challenges everything you were taught. Your soul feels too big for the space. What frightens most people isn't the idea that God might be distant. What truly terrifies them is the possibility that God might be close, unbearably, unavoidably close. Close enough to bypass institutions, close enough to expose the difference between connection and conditioning, close enough to reveal that the real sacred place was never the building, but the consciousness you were told to distrust. Picture one single moment when the divine speaks with absolute clarity. No thunder, no burning bush, no cosmic spectacle. Just a sentence that cuts straight through your learned obedience. A sentence that makes fear look flimsy. A sentence that makes ritual look decorative. A sentence that reminds you of a truth you felt as a child, but buried to survive adulthood. Now imagine that moment spreading quietly from person to person. A mother suddenly questioning the guilt she was raised with. A grandfather realizing that he spent his whole life worshiping rules instead of truth. A teenager feeling a presence inside them that no sermon ever mentioned. It wouldn't cause rebellion. It would cause awakening. And awakening is the one thing no system can control. If something in this part feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with it. Recognition is the beginning of transformation. We're just getting started. There is a truth most people feel long before they ever admit it. They don't cling to temples because they need God. They cling to temples because they fear what will happen if they meet God without a witness, without an interpreter, without someone standing between them, and raw, unfiltered honesty. Structures make the divine manageable, predictable, safe. But the divine was never meant to be any of those things. Picture yourself standing in the center of an empty church. Wooden benches stretch into deep shadows like ribs of a sleeping animal. A single candle burns low, its flame trembling as if it knows something you don't. The air feels heavy, not sacred. Heavy, like a room holding its breath. You're used to this place feeling bigger than you, holier than you, louder than your own instincts. But tonight something shifts. It happens quietly, almost imperceptibly. The room no longer feels like a sanctuary. It feels like a container. And you realize, with a sudden jolt of clarity, that you are the only thing in the room that is alive. Fear doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives as recognition. Recognition that if God ever spoke without filters, he wouldn't point to the altar. He would point to you. He wouldn't praise your obedience. He'd question it. He wouldn't ask why you broke rules carved by someone else. He would ask why you never broke the ones that were suffocating you. And in that instant, the definition of holy begins to warp. Imagine lifting your eyes toward the ceiling and hearing a voice that doesn't descend from above or echo from the walls. It rises from inside your chest with the certainty of a heartbeat. The voice doesn't threaten. It doesn't promise anything. It simply reveals. It tells you that you have always been enough, that worthiness was never something you had to earn, that no building, no leader, no ritual ever had the authority to measure the distance between you and the divine, because there was no distance to measure. As that truth settles in your body, the room around you begins to change. The walls don't feel sacred anymore. They feel unnecessary. Not evil, not wrong, just unnecessary, like training wheels left on long after you learned how to ride. You realize how much of your life was spent shrinking yourself to fit beliefs that were designed for control, not connection. You realize how often fear was sold to you as virtue. You realize that what you were taught was humility, was actually silence. This is the fear that keeps systems alive. Not the fear of sin, not the fear of punishment. The fear that people might discover they don't need a system at all. For centuries, institutions built themselves not to amplify the divine, but to manage it, to organize it, to tame it. Because a free soul is unpredictable. A free soul asks dangerous questions. A free soul cannot be governed by guilt. But what if the thing you were told would make you lost is the exact thing that would set you free? What if the guidance you trusted your whole life was the very thing keeping you from hearing the voice within you that never stopped speaking? If this part stirred something inside you, a flicker, a sting, a sense of remembering, do not turn away from it. This is the part of the journey where the old walls begin to loosen and the real truth begins to breathe. There comes a night in every life when the air feels different, thicker, charged. A night when the darkness doesn't just surround you, it studies you. You can feel it in your skin like static before a storm. Something inside you flickers, faint at first, like a spark trapped beneath years of noise and obedience. You try to ignore it the way you always do. You try to distract yourself with routines that keep you numb. But the spark spreads, slowly, quietly, inevitably. And then you understand. A truth you have outrun for years is finally catching up. Picture yourself standing beneath a vast, starless sky. No moon to guide you. No light to soften the edges. Just endless darkness stretching above you like a question you've been avoiding your entire life. Everything is silent, yet the silence feels alive, as if the universe itself is leaning in, waiting for you to finally pay attention. In that stillness, you feel something you have never allowed yourself to feel before. Honesty. Not borrowed honesty. Not ritualized honesty. Your honesty. You realize how long you have been searching for answers in places designed to keep you wandering in circles. You kneeled in rooms built by human hands while ignoring the infinite cathedral above you and the infinite cathedral inside you. You repeated words written by others while silencing the voice that was always your own. And for the first time, in this dark, starless night, you see the difference. The sky feels honest. The silence feels honest. The darkness feels honest. More honest than any sermon you were ever taught to trust. Then the presence arrives. Not in a miracle, not in a vision, in a feeling. A closeness so real it almost startles you. You realize the divine was never distant. It was you who stepped away. You who believed it lived elsewhere. You who accepted a world built on intermediaries. Now the closeness is overwhelming. It strips away excuses. It strips away fear. It strips away every layer of belief that taught you to stay small. And then it happens, not in words, but in certainty. A truth enters you like lightning splitting open the night. It does not destroy. It illuminates. And in that illumination, you see yourself with a clarity that almost hurts. You see a soul that is not broken, only buried. Not lost, only silenced. Not weak, only underestimated. You see power you were taught to mistrust. You see potential you were trained to downplay. You see a connection to the divine that cannot be owned, managed, or approved by anyone. This is what institutions fear. Not rebellion, because rebellion still acknowledges their authority. Not sin, because sin still plays by their rules. They fear awakening, because awakening is contagious. When one person realizes they can hear truth directly, others begin to wonder why they cannot. When one person stops kneeling, others begin to stand. And once people begin to stand, control collapses. Imagine an entire community awakening in the same silent breath. People stepping out of buildings they believed were gateways to heaven, only to discover that the true gate was inside them all along. People lifting their faces to the sky and feeling something rituals never gave them. Their own spiritual pulse, their own inner knowing, their own unfiltered connection to everything that exists. The night the sky opens is not a miracle. It is a transition. From dependence to awareness, from obedience to identity, from fear to presence. Once you feel it, you cannot go back to the person you were before. The world looks the same, but you don't walk through it the same way. This is the beginning of real freedom. Quiet freedom. Inner freedom. The kind that cannot be taken away. If something in you is shifting as you read this, even slightly, hold on to it. Let it grow. The truth is not finished with you yet. There is a final moment in every inner awakening, a moment people rarely talk about because it does not look dramatic from the outside. There is no thunder, no tears, no revelation carved in fire across the sky. It arrives quietly, almost shyly, like a breath you did not realize you were holding. And yet it hits harder than anything that came before. It is the moment when the noise you absorbed your whole life, the rules, the warnings, the guilt, the borrowed fears, finally loosens its grip and slides away like dust from old fabric. And in that sudden weightlessness, you feel something sharp rise inside you, something you have avoided your entire life. Clarity. Imagine sitting alone in a dim room. No symbols, no candles, nothing external to guide you. Only your breath, steady and unhurried, and the faint hum of your own existence. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable, almost hostile, because you were trained to fear silence. Silence leaves you alone with yourself. Silence strips away the voices of authority. Silence forces you to confront the truth that has been knocking on the door of your mind for years. But then something shifts. The silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels full, alive. It feels like a presence you can almost touch. And in that presence, you finally understand why you were encouraged to fill every quiet moment with noise. Because silence reveals the one thing institutions cannot control: you, your unfiltered consciousness, your unmediated connection to the divine, your ability to hear truth without permission. In this stillness you see, with painful clarity, how much of your life was shaped around the belief that you were incomplete, that you needed someone else to translate the sacred, that you needed an intermediary to reach what was already woven into your being from the beginning. Now picture every rule you were taught suddenly held up to the light of this new awareness. They do not crumble dramatically. They dissolve. They lose weight. They lose authority. You realize they were never built to guide you. They were built to govern you. And now, for the first time, you see yourself without the lens of fear. There is no shame, no guilt, no unworthiness, only a spark that has been quietly waiting for years to be recognized. Imagine a world where God speaks honestly, without rituals, without performance, without middlemen. A world where every person hears truth directly inside themselves. A world where faith is not something managed, but lived. In that world, churches would not collapse. They would simply become unnecessary, not from rebellion, from irrelevance. Because once you understand the divine does not live in stone walls, but in your consciousness, everything built to control your access to it becomes transparent. Picture ordinary people awakening one by one. A woman doing dishes suddenly recognizing the presence she chased her whole life was inside her breath. A man on a bus realizing his intuition was not a random feeling, but a message he ignored for years. A teenager staring at the night sky, understanding for the first time that the ache in their chest was not emptiness, but connection. These moments do not make noise. They make transformation. This is the final step. Not a declaration, not rebellion, not breaking away. It is something quieter. Acceptance. Acceptance of responsibility for your own truth. Acceptance that your connection to the divine needs no permission slip. Acceptance that you no longer have to play small to make others comfortable. Acceptance that the doorway you searched for your entire life was never hidden. It was inside you, waiting. When the heart stops asking for permission, everything changes. You no longer bend yourself to fit beliefs too small for your soul. You no longer dim your intuition to avoid confrontation. You no longer look outside for what has been inside you since the beginning. And you finally see the truth the world fears most. You were never powerless. You were never disconnected. You were never lost. You were convinced you were. Because a person who knows their own connection cannot be controlled. If this final part touched something in you, even softly, even quietly, I invite you gently to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Not for numbers, not for algorithms, but because your voice may be the spark someone else has been waiting for.